Hello, listeners of the latest episode. Welcome to the new chapter of our story.
3 weeks after the triple strike disaster, John Martinez sat in the war room and studied something he hadn't seen since Denver General Hospital. A map with green markers indicating successful operations and 0 red markers for casualties. 7 strikes in 3 weeks, 7 different teams, operating independently with no central coordination. Supply convoy ambush, research outpost infiltration, Fort Carson patrol elimination, communications relay sabotage, modified infected transport hijacking, weapons cache raid, guard rotation ambush, 0 friendly casualties, significant damage to Project Lazarus operations in Colorado. The chaos strategy was working. Team 6 just reported in, David Chen said, monitoring the radio frequencies they'd established for post-operation check-ins only. Clean extraction from the Peterson perimeter. They eliminated the guard rotation and planted surveillance equipment before withdrawing. No contact, no complications. John marked the 7th green circle on the map. Peterson Air Force Base. The site where 2 of his people had died in the explosion 3 weeks ago. Now they'd struck back successfully, proving that the base wasn't invincible. Michael entered the war room, his tactical vest still dusty from a patrol that had turned into an opportunity strike. We hit a supply transport on Highway 24, 3 trucks carrying medical equipment and laboratory supplies, destroyed 2, captured 1. Dr. Morrison is inventorying the haul now. Looks like enough antibiotics and surgical supplies to keep us running for 6 months. Another green marker, 8 successful operations. Webb must be losing his mind, Chen said. He's used to fighting opponents who plan, who coordinate, who follow predictable patterns. We're giving him nothing to intercept, nothing to predict. He'll adapt, John said. He always adapts. We've bought ourselves time, disrupted his operations, but he's already working on a counter-strategy. Then we adapt faster, Michael said. Keep hitting him before he can establish a pattern. Stay unpredictable. It was sound tactics, but John's instincts, honed through 2 decades of military operations, were screaming warnings. They'd been winning for 3 weeks. In John's experience, winning streaks ended badly when you got comfortable. Tell all team leaders to stay vigilant, John said. No pattern to operations, no predictable timing. If something feels wrong, abort immediately. Webb's silence worries me more than his attacks. The investigation into the 2nd traitor had been grinding forward while the guerrilla operations succeeded. Jennifer Santos had narrowed the source of encrypted transmissions to 8 people with access to the eastern section and the technical knowledge to operate military-grade communications equipment. Thomas Anderson was number 3 on the suspect list. 43 years old, former Army communications specialist, deployed to Afghanistan twice before the outbreak. He'd been one of the original 40 survivors who'd joined John after Marcus Chen's death, before David Chen's group arrived from Colorado Springs. Anderson had fought in the network war, had been at Denver General when John burned Patient 0, had attended Rachel's funeral, and helped dig the 17 graves after the triple strike disaster. John had trained him personally, trusted him completely. The evidence was circumstantial at first. Anderson had access to the transmission equipment. His military background included encryption protocols. His quarters were in the eastern section where transmissions originated. But Jennifer kept digging. Cross-referenced transmission times with personnel schedules. Analyzed content that could have come from Anderson's knowledge base. Built a timeline that aligned suspiciously well with Webb's responses to resistance activities. "I need to search his quarters," Jennifer told John privately. "If he's the leak, there'll be evidence. Communications equipment he's not supposed to have. Encryption keys. Something physical that ties him to the transmissions." "Do it," John said, but quietly. "If he's innocent and we accuse him publicly, we destroy another piece of trust. If he's guilty and we tip him off, he'll destroy evidence." The search was conducted while Anderson was on patrol, a routine security sweep that kept him away from quarters for 6 hours. Jennifer and 2 others went through his belongings methodically, looking for anything that didn't belong. They found it in a hollowed-out book, a compact radio transceiver, military-grade, with encryption capabilities far beyond what the community possessed, and hidden in the false bottom of his footlocker, wrapped in oilcloth, photographs. A teenage girl, 16, maybe 17, blonde hair, blue eyes, holding a birthday cake in one photo, playing guitar in another. A normal kid in a world before the outbreak destroyed normal. On the back of each photograph, written in ink that had faded from handling, "Stay strong, sweetheart. Dad's coming for you." "His daughter," Jennifer said quietly. "I checked Anderson's personnel file. He listed her as deceased during the initial outbreak, but these photos are recent. The timestamp metadata shows they were taken within the past 4 months. John studied the photographs. The girl was alive, or had been 4 months ago, and someone was using her as leverage against her father. "Set up surveillance," John ordered. "I want to know when Anderson transmits next. I want to hear what he says. Don't confront him until we have the full picture." The surveillance lasted 3 days. Anderson maintained his normal routine, patrols, training sessions, community duties. But on the 3rd night, at 0300 hours, he left his quarters with the hidden transceiver. Jennifer's team followed him to a maintenance tunnel on the perimeter, far from any occupied sections. Listened as Anderson powered up the transceiver and transmitted on an encrypted frequency. "Control, this is Asset Echo. Weekly report. Resistance operations continue. 8 successful strikes in 3 weeks. Independent cell structure. I've attached personnel rosters and approximate operating areas based on post-mission reports. No specific operational plans. They're not sharing objectives in advance anymore." A pause while he waited for response. Then his voice again, quieter, more desperate. "My daughter. I need proof of life. It's been 9 days since the last update. The agreement was weekly verification. I've provided intelligence on schedule. I need to know she's—" The response came through, audible to Jennifer's surveillance equipment. Webb's voice, cold and professional. "Asset Echo, your daughter remains alive and uninfected as long as you continue providing valuable intelligence. Next proof of life will be provided after you deliver information on resistance leadership locations, specifically Captain Martinez's current operating base. I've given you everything I can without compromising. You will provide the base location or your daughter will be infected with the modified strain. Webb interrupted. You have 72 hours. Control out. The transmission ended. Anderson sat in the tunnel for 20 minutes, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. Then he powered down the transceiver, hit it again, and returned to his quarters. Jennifer reported everything to John, Chen, and Michael in a private briefing. He's not ideologically compromised, Jennifer said. Webb has his daughter, 16 years old, captured 4 months ago. Every week Anderson transmits intelligence. Webb sends proof she's still alive and uninfected. It's leverage, pure and simple. How long has this been going on? Chen asked. Based on transmission logs I've recovered, at least 4 months. Since before the triple strike operation, Anderson's intelligence contributed to Webb knowing about our plans. Which means he's partly responsible for 17 deaths. Michael finished. Rachel, the others, they died because Anderson chose his daughter over the community. He chose his daughter over strangers, John corrected quietly. That's not the same thing. Any parent would make the same choice. So what do we do? Chen asked. Execute him? Imprison him? Use him as a double agent? John thought about the photographs, about a 16-year-old girl being held hostage to control her father, about the impossible choice between family and community, between love and duty. We confront him, John said. Give him a chance to explain. Then we decide. They brought Anderson to the war room at 0600 hours before the community was awake. John, Chen, and Michael waiting. Jennifer monitoring to ensure privacy. Anderson took one look at their expressions and knew. You found the radio, he said. It wasn't a question. We found the radio, John confirmed, and the photographs, and we intercepted your transmission to Webb 3 nights ago. Anderson sat down heavily, looking suddenly older. How long have you known? 3 days. We've been deciding what to do with you. I can save you the trouble, Anderson said. I'm guilty. I've been transmitting intelligence to Webb for 4 months. Personnel information, operational capabilities, base security details. Everything except specific operational plans. I didn't have access to those after you went to cell structure. Why? Michael demanded. We trusted you, trained you, brought you into our community, and you betrayed us for my daughter, Anderson interrupted, his voice suddenly fierce. For Sarah. She's 16 years old. She plays guitar. She wants to be a veterinarian. She survived the outbreak because I taught her to hide, to be quiet, to stay safe. He pulled out the photographs, laid them on the table. Webb's people captured her 4 months ago during a supply raid. I was on patrol, came back to find our quarters destroyed, and Sarah gone. 3 days later, I received a transmission. Webb's voice. He told me Sarah was alive, told me he'd infected her with the modified strain but hadn't triggered the transformation yet. Anderson's hands shook as he continued. He said if I provided intelligence on resistance activities, he'd keep her alive and human. Every week I transmit, I get proof of life. Photographs, voice recordings, evidence that my daughter is still my daughter and not a monster. So you chose her over the community, Chen said. I chose her over everything, Anderson said flatly. If that makes me a traitor, fine. I'm a traitor, but I'm a father first. You have children, you'd understand. You'd make the same choice. John thought about Rachel, about the 18-year-old he'd trained and sent into danger, about the guilt of losing someone under his command. He couldn't imagine what it would be like to have his own child held hostage, being slowly transformed into a weapon. Webb demanded our base location, John said. Gave you 72 hours. What were you planning to do? I was planning to give it to him, Anderson said. I was planning to tell Webb exactly where we are, how many people we have, what our defenses look like. Because Sarah is worth more to me than this community, worth more than the resistance, worth more than anything. The honesty was brutal. No justification, no attempt to minimize, just raw truth. If you give Webb our location, he'll attack, Michael said. 64 people will die. Children, families, everyone. I know, Anderson said. And I was going to do it anyway, because those 64 people aren't my daughter. You want to execute me for that? Go ahead. But you can't ask a father to choose between his child and strangers. That's not a choice. It's torture. John stood up, walked to the window overlooking the community. People were starting to wake up, fires being lit, daily routines beginning, 64 survivors trying to build something from the ruins. We can use this, John said finally. What? Chen asked. Webb wants our base location. We give it to him, but not the real one. We feed Anderson false information through channels he'd believably have access to. He transmits to Webb. Webb believes it because Anderson's been reliable for 4 months. Webb commits forces to attack the fake location. And we ambush the ambush, Michael said, understanding dawning. Turn Webb's trap into our trap. Exactly, John said. But it only works if Webb believes Anderson is still compromised and undetected, which means Anderson has to go back to his normal routine, has to keep transmitting, has to sell the deception. He turned to Anderson. I'm offering you a choice. Work with us as a double agent. Feed Webb information we control. In exchange, we help you get Sarah back. You can't promise that, Anderson said. Webb's facility is Fort Carson or somewhere equally fortified. You don't have the forces to assault a major installation and extract one hostage. No, John agreed, but we have something better. We have desperation and creativity, and we have you. Someone Webb trusts who can potentially get inside his facility. It's a long shot, but it's better than watching your daughter die while you sit in a cell. Anderson looked at the photographs of Sarah. What do you need me to do? The double agent operation took careful planning. Anderson would continue his weekly transmissions, but now the intelligence came from John and Chen. Accurate enough to seem legitimate, but strategically useless or deliberately misleading. The first test came 5 days later. Anderson transmitted information about a new resistance base being established in an abandoned school on the east side of Denver. Described it in detail: defensive positions, personnel assignments, supply storage, all fabricated, but detailed enough to seem real. Webb's response came within 24 hours. Proof of life for Sarah, a new photograph and a 10-second video of her saying, "I'm okay, Dad, still human, love you." And 3 days after that, Jennifer's surveillance detected Webb's forces moving toward the abandoned school. 12 armed personnel, 2 vehicles, tactical approach patterns. The resistance was waiting, not to engage. John had learned that lesson, but to observe, confirm that Webb was taking the bait, adjust the deception based on his response. Webb's team spent 2 hours searching the abandoned school, found nothing, and withdrew. But they'd committed forces. They'd believed the intelligence. The deception was working. "We can feed him bigger targets," Chen said. "Convince him we're planning major operations. Get him to commit significant resources to defending locations we're not actually attacking." "Carefully," John cautioned. "If we make it too obvious, Webb will realize Anderson's been compromised. We need to balance useful intelligence with plausible misdirection." It was a delicate game, but for 2 weeks it worked. Anderson transmitted carefully crafted intelligence. Webb responded with proof of life. The Resistance used Webb's responses to map his force deployments and defensive priorities. They were winning the information war. Then the Hunters came. Michael's team was returning from a successful raid on a supply cache when the attack happened. 4 fighters, moving through the ruins of eastern Denver at night, following their usual extraction route. The Hunter had been tracking them for miles. It struck with surgical precision, not the mindless aggression of standard infected, but calculated patient violence. It separated the team, targeting the rear guard first. Marcus Webb Jr., the younger one, not the traitor from Part 5, died without making a sound, throat crushed before he could call out. The team didn't realize he was gone until they stopped to regroup 200 yards later. "Where's Marcus?" Michael asked. They backtracked, found his body in an alley. The wounds were different from standard infected attacks, clean, efficient, targeting vital areas, and the body showed signs of having been studied, tactical gear removed and examined, weapons inspected, like the killer was learning. "Defensive formation," Michael ordered. "Something's hunting us." They moved carefully, weapons ready, scanning the darkness. The Hunter shadowed them for another half-mile, just at the edge of visibility. When they tried to engage, it faded back into the ruins. When they focused on extraction, it closed the distance. Jennifer Santos was the second casualty. She'd been providing overwatch from an elevated position when the Hunter reached her from an approach angle that should have been impossible. Climbing the exterior of a building with modified musculature that allowed for enhanced mobility. The fight was brief and brutal. Jennifer got off 3 shots before the Hunter disarmed her. Michael heard her scream, managed to put 2 rounds into the Hunter's torso before it retreated again, but not before taking Jennifer's radio and tactical map. "It's learning," Michael transmitted to base. "Whatever this thing is, it's not just attacking. It's studying us, learning our equipment, our tactics. We need immediate extraction." The Hunter pursued them for another 3 miles, killed 1 more team member, wounded Michael and the 4th survivor before they finally managed to concentrate enough fire to bring it down. When they got it back to base, Dr. Morrison's examination revealed the nightmare. "This isn't standard modified infection," Morrison said, standing over the Hunter's corpse. "This is next-generation enhancement. Look at the muscle density, twice what we saw in previous modified infected. The sensory organs have been augmented. Enhanced olfactory capability, improved visual acuity in darkness. additional neural processing centers. He pointed to a small device embedded at the base of the skull. And this, some kind of organic neural transmitter. It's connected directly to the brainstem. I think it allows for information sharing between multiple infected units. A network? John asked. Similar but different from what Patient Zero created. This is more focused, less quantum entanglement, more direct data transmission, and based on the sophistication of the modifications. I'd say this wasn't a recent development. Webb's been working on these for months. Morrison pulled up photographs on his laptop. I'm calling them hunters, and based on the manufacturing markers I'm seeing in the embedded technology, Webb created at least 12 of them. 12, Chen repeated. Where are the other 11? That question was answered over the next week, as hunter attacks were reported across Colorado. Independent resistance cells, teams John had no direct contact with, transmitted desperate warnings before going silent. The hunters weren't randomly attacking survivors. They were specifically targeting resistance fighters, could identify combat training through movement patterns, could track tactical teams through scent markers and equipment signatures, could coordinate ambushes that required human-level strategic thinking. Webb had weaponized the infection beyond anything they'd imagined, and he'd deployed it specifically to eliminate the guerrilla cells that had been so successful for the past 3 weeks. They're learning from each kill, Jennifer reported during the emergency briefing. She'd survived the hunter attack, but was badly wounded. Number 7 took tactical gear and examined it, studied our movement patterns. And according to Dr. Morrison's analysis of the neural transmitter, it was sharing that information with the other hunters in real time. Which means what 7 learned about Michael's team, all 12 hunters now know. John said, our tactics, our equipment, our standard operating procedures. They'll adapt their hunting patterns accordingly. We have to warn the other teams, Michael said. Get them to ground, change their protocols, avoid... We can't, Chen interrupted. The whole point of cell structure is no communication between teams. If we start broadcasting warnings, Webb intercepts and uses it to locate our base. Then we recall them, Michael insisted. Pull everyone back to base until we understand this threat. If we recall them, we abandon the guerrilla strategy that's been working, John said. We consolidate in one location where Webb can target us all at once. It was an impossible calculation. Warn the teams and compromise operational security. Recall them and abandon the only strategy that had succeeded. Continue operations and watch hunters eliminate teams one by one. There has to be a 4th option, Chen said. John studied the map, the locations where hunter attacks had been reported. The hunters are targeting active operations, teams in the field, moving, conducting raids. What if we shift strategy? Instead of offensive operations, we focus on hunter elimination, turn our teams from predators into hunters. You want to hunt the hunters? Michael asked. We can't let them control the battlefield, John said. Can't let Webb's weapons force us into defensive positions. We need to eliminate the hunters before they eliminate us, and we use Anderson's intelligence feed to locate them. He turned to Anderson, who'd been listening quietly. Webb created 12 hunters. He's deploying them across Colorado. That means he's tracking their positions, coordinating their operations. You transmit a request for hunter deployment schedules. Claim you need to know where they'll be operating so you can keep Sarah's location from being attacked. Webb won't buy that, Anderson said. He knows I'd prioritize Sarah's location over resistance intelligence. Then make it personal, John said. Tell him you've heard rumors about hunters targeting civilians, that you're worried about collateral damage in areas where Sarah might be held. Ask for assurance that the hunters won't approach Fort Carson. It was thin, but it was plausible. A father worried about his daughter's safety, trying to get information without seeming too desperate. Anderson transmitted the request that night. Webb's response came 18 hours later. Not deployment schedules, but general operating areas. 11 hunters still active. Number 7 eliminated by resistance forces, Michael's team. The remaining hunters were concentrated in 3 zones: northern Colorado, eastern plains, and the Front Range corridor. He's using them to restrict our operating area, Chen said, studying the hunter positions, funneling resistance teams into kill zones, where he's established defensive positions. Then we don't go where he expects, John said. We hit the areas he thinks are safe. Use the hunter positions to identify where Webb has weakened his defenses. It was chess. Move and counter-move. Webb deployed hunters to control the battlefield. John used hunter positions to identify vulnerabilities. Webb would adapt. John would counter-adapt. The guerrilla war had evolved into something more complex. Not just hit-and-run strikes, but strategic deception, information warfare, and hunter elimination operations. 3 weeks of victories had bought them time. Now they had to use that time before Webb's next adaptation overwhelmed them. The first deliberate hunter elimination operation launched 4 days later. Team 3 had located hunter number 4, operating in the northern suburbs. Rather than avoid it, they set a trap. Human bait, a small group appearing to conduct a supply raid. The hunter tracked them, moved to ambush, but the actual strike team was positioned in concealment, waiting for the hunter to reveal itself. The engagement was brutal. Hunters were faster and stronger than standard modified infected, but they weren't invulnerable. Concentrated fire, explosive traps, and tactical coordination brought number 4 down. Dr. Morrison examined the corpse, extracted the neural transmitter. If we can analyze this technology, we might be able to jam the network, prevent the hunters from sharing information. Or we use it to feed false information, Jennifer suggested. If we can access the transmission protocols, we might be able to make the hunters think they're learning one thing while we're actually doing another. It was ambitious, but the resistance had been built on ambitious plans that shouldn't have worked, but did anyway. Over the next 2 weeks, 3 more hunters were eliminated, numbers 4, 9, and 11. Each kill provided more intelligence about hunter capabilities and limitations. Each neural transmitter Morrison recovered brought them closer to understanding Webb's network. But the cost was significant. 8 resistance fighters killed in hunter operations, 12 more wounded. The casualty rate was approaching the levels from coordinated operations. We're trading lives for intelligence, Michael said during a strategy session, At some point, we have to ask if it's worth it. It's worth it if we learn enough to stop the hunters completely, John said. Every neural transmitter we recover, every tactical pattern we identify, brings us closer to a countermeasure. And if we can't develop a countermeasure, Chen asked, if Webb just creates more hunters to replace the ones we kill. Then we find Webb's production facility and burn it down, John said. Same as we did with the network hubs. Same as we'll do with every facility he builds. We stay one step ahead, or we die trying. It was the only strategy available. Reactive, desperate, constantly adapting, but it was keeping them alive. Anderson's weekly transmission included updates on hunter elimination operations, carefully worded to seem like intelligence gathering, while actually seeking information about Webb's hunter production capabilities. Webb's response was predictable: increased security at key facilities, redeployment of remaining hunters to protect high-value assets. Exactly the response John needed to identify where Webb's most important installations were located. He's protecting 3 locations heavily, Jennifer analyzed, after intercepting Webb's communications to hunter handlers: Fort Carson, Cheyenne Mountain, and a facility we haven't identified yet. The transmission coordinates suggest it's somewhere in the mountains west of Denver. That's his hunter production facility, John said with certainty. The place where he's creating and programming the modified infected. If we can locate it and destroy it, we stop the hunter threat at its source. That's a major operation, Chen warned. Not a guerrilla strike. We'd need coordination, planning, significant force commitment. Then we plan carefully, John said. We use Anderson to feed Webb information that pulls his forces away from the facility. We identify the production site, and we hit it with everything we have. It was ambitious, risky, required the kind of coordinated operation that had failed catastrophically 3 weeks ago. But the guerrilla victories had bought them time and intelligence. Anderson's double agent status gave them leverage. Hunter eliminations had provided critical data about Webb's capabilities. For the first time since the triple strike disaster, John felt like they weren't just surviving. They were fighting back effectively, building toward something bigger. The war with Project Lazarus had entered a new phase. And this time, the resistance was learning faster than Webb could adapt.